Good morning from Panhandle Outdoors with Winston Chester. Panhandle Outdoors, your source for fishing, hunting, and information for folks who enjoy the great outdoors. Now sit back, relax. It's Panhandle Outdoors.
Good morning. Welcome to Panhandle Outdoors. It is Monday morning, January the 27th. This is Bill Allen sitting in for Winston Chester, and we've got a really great show lined up for you today. We've got two guests, and we're going to be discussing what's going on with Tyndall and the closures, the proposed closures out there. And so you need to call your neighbors and tell them to watch the show and maybe help to get a little bit informed about what's going on. So let's jump into the weather, excuse me, brought to us by Haney Technical Center. The high today is going to be 59, and we're looking at a low tonight of 32, wind north-northwest at 9 miles per hour. Okay, it's cool. The continued cool is with us for a while. High tide today, and the tide's brought to us by Kent Forest Lawn Funeral Home. High tide is 6:17 p.m. this evening, so you got a good incoming tide all day, and then you have a low of 4:15 a.m. this morning. Looking at the river readings, Apalachicola is at 9 feet and still continuing to fall, so excellent fishing conditions over there. Same thing at the Choctawhatchee at Caryville at 7 feet and falling. Now we look at our Mark Cowart Edgewater Beach peak fishing times. It's great times, as a matter of fact, 6:15 this morning to 8:15, and then 7:35 to 9:35 tonight. It's going to be a little cool out there, so dress warm. We're going to go ahead and take our break, get right back with our guests, and start looking at this issue with Tyndall Air Force Base. Welcome back. I am joined this morning by Captain Matt Smith,
morning,
good
Bill.
friend, good partner, and Mayor Greg Brudnicki, and also outdoorsman who spends a great deal of time fishing and a lot of it with me. So what we want to do this morning, there's been a lot going on about the potential or proposed closures around Tyndall Air Force Base. And I've had a great number of people to ask me questions about it, and to, there's a lot of hearsay out there, which, unfortunately is not any way to conduct business. But let me just say right now, and I'll speak for everybody here because we've already discussed it, everybody here supports our military 100%. And also the, Tyndall Air Force Base and the Navy base here, they're vital to our economy, and vital to our safety, not only in the nation but abroad, as we've all seen. And we all have family that served in the military and long histories of that. So everybody here supports it. And I do appreciate the fact that Tyndall is willing to listen to public input, okay? Because, kind of as we discussed, they really don't have to.
That's true.
And they're listening, and to that fact, they have made some changes from the first time that they brought this out. Okay? Now, I also want to say that the information is there in writing. I spent some time yesterday afternoon. Unfortunately, it's the first time that I've looked for it. As limited as I am with a computer, in 5 minutes I was able to find the updates, and I got it directly from Tyndall's website itself. And also was able to print the entire proposal there, okay, the updated proposal. So I don't want to dominate the conversation, but the one thing that I've seen, and I've gone to FWC meetings and school board meetings and city meetings and those kind of things, is when you get your 5 minutes to speak, do everybody a favor and do some research and be educated about the facts and what's going on. Okay, the worst thing in the world is for somebody to get up there and just go on and on and on when they're not even near what the actual facts are. I know we can all get emotional about things, but speak from a point of education and a little bit of research. So that's I'm on my soapbox now, but I just believe that's important, and I know you see it, and I know that you've got some information as well from a different source.
Absolutely. My big thing is to that's the whole purpose of the show, trying to do this to where, and that's really been the mission statement of Panhandle Outdoors all along, is to try to be as up to date and current and keep people informed, and we have a perfect opportunity to to do that. And I think the biggest thing is for everybody to be under the same understanding or on the same page as what's trying to be accomplished. And ideally, you would like to think there would be some type of compromise, but that's what we're here to discuss. And hopefully, with this meeting, January the 30th, there may be a
which is in Mexico Beach.
Which in Mexico Beach.
Now, Greg, I know as mayor that you've had the opportunity to speak individually to the commander and some of the people out there.
Yes, we had a group come to the city right after this first started, and they came and spoke to us about what was going on. And you got to put some common sense into this issue. Right now, if you think about what is already going on, and right now, who has jurisdiction? The main thing with Tyndall is that right now the Coast Guard has jurisdiction. Tyndall only has jurisdiction up to the water line. So they wanted to establish, if there is some type of threat, that they would have it for the first 500 feet out. Say, for example, something happens, who has jurisdiction not on Tyndall, but on the other side of the pass? The Coast Guard, okay? And so what Tyndall has to deal with is there was word that came down from the Department of Defense, and so these boundaries were established around Eglin and around other bases, and there really was nothing in place here for Tyndall. So it came about because someone says if you want the base to remain a going concern, they have to be able to establish this jurisdiction. Now, and this is not a closure, this is a potential closure if there is a terrorist threat. So, I mean, right now, if there was a terrorist threat, and what would go on? I guess it would only be the Coast Guard until they relinquished over to Tyndall. So in their plan for Tyndall, they'd have wanted them to have something established. And this is not something that's imminent. This is not something that is going to be a closure of the whole 129 miles all at once. I mean, if there is a terrorist threat and it is so drastic that it was going to affect the citizens of Bay County or anybody that's visiting here, I don't want to be out there in the water.
No.
So I think that they needed to establish this jurisdiction so that they would have it for the first 500 feet out. And yet now it's kind of, and I noticed when I went to the meeting, the first meeting, a lot of people were using it as a venue to vent their frustrations about other things that had nothing to do with that issue. Stay on point. I mean, some colonel that's working over there at Tyndall, he doesn't have anything to do with what's going on in Washington, D.C. and any of that. So,
good point. Excellent point. All right, we're going to take a quick break, but we're going to continue this conversation and bring up some points of the changes that they've made. All right, welcome back. We want to continue this discussion. I want to, thank Greg for his insights there. As being able to speak to them personally out there is something that you would expect from our mayor. But I also want to say that there's very few people, I'm sure they are, that spend more time fishing in East Bay than we do. So this is near and dear, I promise you. Now, Matt, you had you wanted to bring up an interesting perspective about some research that you've done.
One thing is pretty obvious for everybody, and there's a lot of different areas that are affected. But we live in a day and a time where we're constantly seeing areas or restrictions, and things are constantly changing. So you do have to be on top of it. I always like to use South Florida as an example, and I say a lot of times, especially from a conservation standpoint, as an example of what not to do. I think we always have had a little bit of a leg up on trying to learn from some of the things that have taken place other parts of the state and maybe do things better when we have an opportunity. There have been parts of the Everglades. There's issues right now with the Keys as far as access, and one of the things that's really eye-opening is when these, and it's somewhat indirectly related to this, not to get too sidetracked, but when it's put out as something for conservation or restricted area with being a national park, something like that, and everybody's in agreement, and the policy, the law is put into place, and then some years down the road, the changes are made as to what allows you to come and go in those areas. And generally speaking, with things like this, once it's put into place, it's very hard to reverse or go back or make a change. So I think that's why most people, citizens, especially sportsmen, people that are on the water, really get on the defensive when it comes to, especially an area like Bay County with as much of an impact as this. It really raises a lot of attention, a lot of red flags, and so everybody's cautious. And we just, as sportsmen, I think, really want to ensure that we're able to continue to go and utilize areas and have access to something we have our entire lives. That's the main thing.
Right. Now they have listened, and they have made some changes to this proposal. Okay. One being, and you guys just jump in there anytime you want to, and as I was reading it, it's not necessarily, and this is what you understand, that if they enact this, it's not the entire 129 miles. It could be, right, but it could only be portions that were subject to that threat.
Right.
Is that your understanding of it?
That's what the new proposal says.
And then the other thing that we were talking about is this 48-hour review.
48-hour review.
So if in fact that they do close part of it, or the entire 129 miles, they are going to review the threat every 48 hours as to whether or not to continue it or ease it or work within that restriction.
Right. Now, I was told, unfortunately, I was not able to attend the first meeting. I had a prior obligation, but I was told that one of the questions there was, and somebody brought up a good point, was that there would be, they were told by Tyndall, there would be a permit issued to this restricted area once you applied, if there were ever a closure put in place. And when asked how long that process took, somewhere in the range of 2 weeks. And
the permit
to access an area, if a closure is enacted and security threats were such that they would still allow selected civilians to enter that area, that you can apply for a permit, especially if it affected your livelihood.
That's what I was going to say. That it's relating to work.
Correct, right? Correct. But but I don't know if it was clearly defined as that. You may still be for some recreational activities, may have access. But with that being said, that time frame, 2 weeks, that gives a little bit of an idea of, and it's all hypothetical. We don't know how exactly that would be handled, but that permit process taking that long, for instance, for a fishing guide, 2 weeks out of the peak season would be a big deal.
Well, you bring up a good point there, because I wasn't thinking about that when I read this last night. I was thinking more of the people who work on the base, outside contractors maybe, or people who perform some sort of service on the base or the base personnel. I didn't really think about it from a guide perspective, that you might be able to apply to do that. Of course, like you said, it could take 2 weeks, so that could have an impact on your business.
It could, and so where that went from that question, once a group of guys got to talk, was would there be a possibility to apply because obviously you're going to go through a background check and all the required documentation. Could you apply in advance? And if that scenario did ever arise, you would already be approved, have access.
Heard anything about anything like that?
Be able to.
I really haven't, but if you think about having, if there is this threat, they're going to be monitoring this on a minute by minute basis.
Sure.
Tyndall is, and to let someone know once the threat's gone, well then you put out and post that it's open again. And I mean, even the 48-hour issue is to make sure with all the other things that they're doing that they let people know there's no longer a threat. But if there was an active threat for a particular area for whatever reason, I see it would be pretty hard for you to apply to go to that area if that threat was still in place. I mean, once it's gone, and once it's on, it's on. So that can get kind of convoluted, and so I'm not sure how they would deal with that issue. But I think about in terms of the Navy base, there is a 100-foot closure all the way around the Navy base all the time.
That's correct.
They never asked me if they could do it, but they have that in place.
Right.
And so for the first 100 feet, if you approach, they run you off. Of course, it's not for 129 miles, but so that's something to take into consideration.
And that's true. And from somebody who growing up back in high school, I mean, we fished over there near what we call the old ammo pier, you know, the ammo dock, and then that little lagoon that goes to the left all the time. And it's an excellent point. That is closed 100 feet. It's not 129 miles, but the fact is, without a perceived threat or anything else, they just simply close that within 100 feet of the shoreline all through there. And I guarantee you, if you get within that 100 feet or you're even close, somebody's going to drive up either by boat or out on that pier every single time.
Absolutely. And with that being said, and that being a great point, there's a big difference from a fisherman's perspective from 100 feet and 500.
But a big difference.
To be able to effectively, within reason.
You got to make a really long cast.
Access areas, and that's it. And I think it all goes back, and just like Mayor Brudnick, you mentioned, when you have a threat, is anybody going to want to be there? No. But what exactly is going to constitute a threat? Exactly. There's a lot of gray area there, and that's where the concern comes. Is, hey, we don't want this to be something that's kind of a blanket policy and go, long periods of time if there wasn't something that was.
All right, let's take a quick break. We're going to come back and continue this discussion. All right, welcome back as we continue this discussion about the proposals there at Tyndall Air Force Base. Now, Greg made a good point earlier that I just want to reiterate. The Coast Guard, at present, does have the ability or the authority to shut down the entire bay if they decide that it's a threat, because that's what they're charged with. And then as you read, it's through the Rivers and Harbors Act of 1917, which, of course, corresponds with World War I, when everybody realized that we might be vulnerable from that area. And so when you look at it, Greg and I were talking about it the other day fishing, it's allowing Tyndall to maybe act quicker without enforcing, you bringing the middleman in to make the decision and do it. Is that something that you understand from this?
Seems like skipping a step.
You skipping a step, giving Tyndall the authority to do it. Now, I think and it also says in here that they are going to patrol it year round.
Right.
Okay, so you will have, or possibly have, if you look suspicious like we do in fishing East Bay, we're probably going to get checked by, that Air Force patrol out there.
It's called the Tyndall Threat Working Group.
Yeah. And that's also, the group, too, that makes the decision on that 48 hours and things like that.
Right.
And I think what all of us are concerned about is it lies with the commander, but, of course, he will be operating on information defined as a threat through the Department of Defense, right?
Obviously.
And it's kind of what it says in here, but it does give the commander the ability to restrict part of it, or all of it, and then review it. And I think it all goes back to that fear that you could have a commander who just wants that buffer zone. And those are the things that I think that need to be defined maybe a little bit more, just not the ability to say, what is an exact threat, and are we going to shut it down according to that?
That's it. Nobody has a crystal ball, and I think that at the end of the day, that's the big unknown. And an issue came up as far as a sunset clause being written into this, as far as being able to revisit it. And Mayor Brudnick, you brought up a great point. Why not, if nothing else, just review this on an annual basis? If there is a threat or there is a change and they have to enforce it, depending on how that implementation goes, being able to revisit and say, hey, here's an unintended consequence as a result of this that we might be able to tweak, and that gives you some flexibility and not such a.
Well, a lot of people that I've talked to, and Greg, Matt, both, I was shocked that Tyndall didn't already have the authority to do this.
Yeah, in a way, it's.
I just assumed that if there was some sort of threat to the base, by whatever definition, that Tyndall had the ability to do this, and they don't. It lies with the Coast Guard, and again, the Rivers and Harbors Act to do this. So, and one of the questions I had, and I asked Greg, was, I thought they always had it. So I'm saying, well, why bring this up now? And I may be the only one that thinks that, but I think there are a lot of people who think that this is, that they had the ability to do it, and now they're bringing this up because they're planning on doing something. But it's a result of security
Basically,
Research.
an inspection, yeah,
An
an
inspection.
inspection of sorts, and then said that there was a major issue here, a security gap, potential security gap.
Which I can understand.
And
That's
it
a
is
whole lot of
understandable.
area out
Yeah.
there. But it's not just, the Tyndall, but there's bases all over have gone through this security analysis or study for a better reason. So it's not just Tyndall. So that alleviated, some of my fears about this was the fact that
Just wasn't something.
I always thought they could do it.
Right.
I just always assumed they could do it. So now we want to reiterate that this meeting coming up is in Mexico Beach. It's a town hall meeting, January the 30th, from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at the Mexico Beach Civic Center. And we encourage everybody to come out there, okay? Tyndall is giving you the opportunity to voice an opinion, much like the city does when they have their open forum things, and we have to appreciate that. And we also have to respect it from where they're coming from, okay? You can research, like Matt did, you found specific articles with the News Herald on the updates. And again, I went directly to Tyndall's website. And right there down the left-hand side, they've got the issue right up front where they had a press release about Tyndall listening and making some changes. And then at the bottom, you can simply click on it, and you can get the whole thing.
Right.
Now, this is not, a 7,500-page Obamacare thing. This is 9 pages, and a lot of it is definitions of where those places are. But it talks about the basis for this, how they came about it. Whether you're for it or whether you're against it, have the opportunity to express your opinion.
And just be informed. That was the purpose of the show, and hopefully everybody picked up a little something, and if nothing else, motivated to make it to this next meeting on the 30th, and be informed and be active and involved.
And if you do go, hopefully everybody that goes there stays on point. and talks
Absolutely.
about
Be
what needs to be
informed,
talked about.
read this before you go. Listen, thanks for watching. I hope you found this informative, and we got to get out of here. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks for joining us for Panhandle Outdoors with Winston Chester. Panhandle Outdoors features hunting, fishing, and other activities and information to help you enjoy the great outdoors. Join us next time for Panhandle Outdoors.